All right, we live. So, wanted to do a quick video, quick stream, basically giving my thoughts on the fight that took place yesterday. World Boxing Organization light flyweight championship bout between Angel Acosta, making his what is this now? Third, his fourth defense of this belt against Ganigan Lopez, former WBC light flyweight champion. I did expect this to be an interesting bout. Ganigan Lopez, even though he's 37 years of age, is a very well experienced fighter. A fighter who lost his belt by somewhat dubious means. I did feel like he defeated Kenshiro in their first bout. They wound up rematching, and Kenshiro managed to stop him with a body shot in the second round of their second bout. But since then, he had bounced back with a good unanimous decision win over Ricardo Rodriguez. And of course, he managed to earn a shot here against Angel Acosta. Angel Acosta, of course, his only loss being the one to by unanimous decision to Kosei Tanaka, veritable pound for pounder. For the people that actually follow the sport of boxing, as opposed to people that just follow what they see on TV hand fed to them. But aside from that loss, he has 20 wins. Well, 20 wins now, and 20 by knockout. He did successfully defend this belt by knocking out Ganigan Lopez in the eighth round of the bout. And what was a pretty interesting fight, a relatively competitive fight. I think actually more competitive than I expected it to be. Lopez is a tricky fighter. He's somebody who's relatively slick, skilled, and someone that is kind of difficult to get a beat on because his overall kind of movement is really awkward. He's a tall, kind of long-armed, kind of rangy fighter that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be able to fight well on the inside, but he actually does. The kind of the ducks and the slips that he does at mid range and on the inside is actually makes him really tricky to find, especially for Acosta, who tends to throw most of his shots as hooks, or even like his right crosses is kind of like hooking right cross shots, as opposed to straight up the pipe, which is kind of where you would prefer to try to get a beat on somebody like a Lopez. But even throwing straight down the pipe, a lot of times he can kind of just make you miss by that, maybe a quarter of an inch and counter you in the midst of that. And it seemed like that's what was kind of happening by and large in the fight. First round, I did think that Acosta started off well. He was stalking behind his power, kind of cutting off the ring, looking to try and trap Ganigan Lopez on the in the ropes and also in the corners. Lopez was utilizing his footwork relatively well and able in order to kind of get himself out of danger, keep from Acosta just tracking him down and pinning him against one of the corners and just starting to tee off with his power. Acosta, like I've kind of half joked about, but in half serious about as well. He's the pound for pound knockout king, man. No other fighter has a perfect knockout record in their wins the same way that he does at this point. Um, Very hard puncher. He did manage to rock Lopez a couple of times throughout the fight. In the second round, however, I did think that Lopez actually had a bit of an advantage over him. He was outlanding Acosta, making a miss, and also doing well countering him. There was one particular shot in the second round, incidentally, though. Acosta managed to kind of clip him on the jaw with a clean left hook that appeared to kind of momentarily stun him, but Lopez kind of went back about doing his business. And I mean, that was a close round that really could have gone either way. I felt like the next round was a similarly kind of close round that could have gone either way. However, I thought that Acosta did the better work in the third. I did think that he was starting to kind of get the distance back, get the gauge back in terms of properly being able to time what Lopez was doing. Acosta did have a slight hand speed advantage and foot speed advantage on Lopez. Being the younger man, you would kind of expect him to. But Lopez was still kind of making himself a tough target to find. He's making himself real tricky to kind of locate here and there. Acosta, I think, kind of won the third and the fourth more so on the volume and being able to throw enough punches that even in the midst of some of the ones that he was missing on Lopez, he would maybe hit him with that second or that fourth punch in the midst of the combination that he was throwing. Lopez, I thought, came back pretty nicely in the fifth and the sixth round. Was actually kind of flummoxing Acosta and making Acosta miss, and to such a degree that I think Acosta was hesitating a little bit with the punches that he was throwing, and more so trying to walk Lopez into one hard shot in order to really try and tee off on him thereafter. He did manage to land a couple of really hard shots, in particular in the seventh round, where he did appear to momentarily stun Lopez once again. Lopez was still, making himself tricky, making himself difficult, and doing a lot of really good hard counters, especially to the body. A lot of left crosses to the body, even like doubling up on it. at times, where he was able to kind of, keep his guard, his right side of his guard high, and also be able to slip in the midst of that in order to either be able to completely avoid or deflect what Acosta was throwing back at him, particularly that left hook, that check left hook that he was trying to clip him with. He did eventually, funny enough, manage to clip him once again with that check left hook in the 8th round, however, in the midst of a combination that Lopez was throwing at him. Rocked Lopez pretty badly. And then Acosta tracked him down and followed up with just a series of nasty left hooks to the body as Lopez was trying to I think, kind of both, like, he almost couldn't decide whether he was trying to, like, run, get out of danger, or clinch. And so in the midst of Acosta running after him, he managed to hit him several times to the body, put him down, and the ref finally gave him the full count, and he was stopped in the 8th round. So another successful title defense for Angel Acosta. Good win for him. Racking up a nice little record for himself. Has knocked out Ganigan Lopez. He knocked out Abraham Rodriguez in his previous fight. Knocked out Carlos Buitrago in the fight previous to that, and knocked out Juan Alejo in the bout to actually win this title in the first place. This being his streak after having lost his initial title shot to Kosei Tanaka. Who Tanaka is now, of course, the WBO flyweight champion. So Acosta's on a nice little bit of a streak. Where he goes from here, not entirely sure. Just being on the zone, being on with Golden Boy, makes it maybe slightly tricky for him to get one of the bigger fights. Maybe he might be able to get a fight against Kenshiro or Hiroto Kyoguchi, the WBC and IBF champs respectively. Considering the fact that Oscar has had a relatively good relationship with the promoters in Japan and stuff, and making fights over there happen, or even like bringing some of the Japanese fighters stateside, making that happen as well. I think he would be live against them. However, I'm not sure if I would favor him against them. I think he might have a better chance at Kyoguchi, because Kyoguchi can sometimes linger in the midst of throwing his combinations. Like sometimes he'll stop and kind of stand, like almost like stand static at like kind of close to mid range, where I think Acosta might be able to land on him. With Kenshiro, I think is a little bit trickier. I think Shiro is so good at judging and gauging distance and being able to navigate that. He'll make himself a really difficult target to hit, and Shiro's very accurate himself. The fight that I'd personally love to see, though, would be him against Felix Alvarado, the IBF champ. Felix Alvarado is just an absolute, like, just destroyer. Somebody that, even though he doesn't have like the glossy, like, all wins by knockout streak the way that that Acosta has, he's every bit as dangerous as Acosta, and his power is absolutely proven. He's knocked out some very, very high level opponents, the likes of Tirapong Utaida in particular, and Randy Pitokorin, former champion, in his last bout. So he's a dangerous fighter. 34-2, 30 knockouts. Somebody that went to the brink with Juan Carlos Revico and Kazuto Ioka, two of the premier fighters at the lower weights over the last several years. And those are his only 2 losses, 2 relatively controversial losses that he arguably, especially in Revico's case, deserved to win. Maybe not quite as much Ioka's case, but he definitely gave Ioka one of the toughest fights of Ioka's career for sure. But he's a very dangerous fighter. Him versus Acosta could be the light flyweight version of Foreman versus Lyle, should that come off. Possibly. It all depends on how the chins hold up, generally speaking. They both have a lot of power. I'm not entirely sure about the chin thing necessary. But I guess that all remains to be seen. But Acosta did a solid job. He got a crafty vet out of there, and did a good job of it. Also on the card was, of course, Ryan Garcia, probably a little bit more pronounced on the card, simply because of his general fame outside of the ring, on Instagram and things of that nature. Pretty much beat the brakes off of Jose Lopez. A very easy victory for him. Jose Lopez was pretty much on his way to getting knocked out, so his corner decided to stop it between the second and the third round. And so that's another good win for Ryan Garcia. Now it looks like he's going to be campaigning at lightweight as opposed to super feather, where he was before, which makes a certain degree of sense. I think if you just kind of look at how much weight he's been having to cut to make 130 to begin with. He's a big guy for having made that weight class in the first place. So lightweight. I'm sure we'll probably see him at 140 eventually at some point too in the near future as well. But solid victory for him. He's looking pretty good. He's sticking the jab really nicely, which he wasn't necessarily doing previously. So I think he leaves his chin hanging out a little bit too much. He might get clipped at some point here in the future. But I mean, he's showing improvement to a certain degree. Getting kind of the former fringe contender level guys out of there, or like I guess kind of journeyman level guys out of there just as quickly as the fringe contender level guys have. So at least he's himself, I guess, making himself um, known as, at the very least for the time being, kind of a fringe contender, so quote unquote. Which isn't necessarily meant to denigrate him. It's only insofar as the fact that he hasn't necessarily proven himself to be beyond that point as of yet. But he's very talented, very quick hands, quick feet, and it'll be interesting to see how he continues to progress with why am I forgetting their names now? With Canelo's training team now training him. So that'll be interesting to see. I see Xavier Gautier in the chat. What's going on, my man? He rocked Lopez in the second. Lopez was in surviving mode all fight. Yeah, I mean, he was definitely to a certain degree, but I do think that Lopez was actually giving him a lot of trouble in the midst of doing that. He's a tricky fighter. I've seen him in the past give fighters that I think are more physically talented than him, like Pedro Guevara, Yuki Mora, Kenshiro, etc. A lot of trouble just being able to kind of find him, just because of the kind of the awkwardness of his motions. Something that's relatively unique and idiosyncratic to him that is, I think, is kind of hard to train for a lot of guys. But I mean, Acosta is one of those guys where, like, if you give him a chance to hit you, man, he's gonna do some serious damage. He just hits too damn hard, too damn hard. That's why, like I mentioned before, him and Alvarado, that's like a potential super fight. Maybe not a super fight in terms of name value and in terms of like fame that they have, but a super fight in terms of like these two guys are straight up badasses and have among the highest knockout ratios, not only like in the sport, but just in the division's history. Historically speaking, at 108 pounds, you struggle to find guys that have knocked out a greater level of opposition, especially at that highest level, that top tier level, than these two guys. Like, it's pretty much, maybe naming them off one hand: Roman Gonzalez, Giovanni Segura, Finito Lopez. These are guys that are bona fide bombers that of the division's past. So that would be a very, very good fight, I think. I do think Acosta could definitely use a little bit more seasoning, though. He's a guy that, because of the fact that he's knocked out so many of his opponents, and because of the fact that he doesn't have quite that many fights, I do think that he could definitely use a little bit more rounds in order to be able to better, like, get together his kind of boxing acumen in terms of being able to gauge distance, find range, things of that nature. He did go a number of rounds against Lopez. He did go a number of rounds against Buitrago. I think ultimately that'll serve him well in the future. Should he fight somebody like a Shiro, who's a very, very good all around boxer. Somebody that kind of, I think, does the inside, does the outside, does the mid range game all very well. Okay, Xavier is asking, what do I think about the prospects that fought on the undercard? Let me try and kind of go down the line with them. Eduardo Hernandez, I actually think relatively highly of. Dangerous fighter, looked impressive. 28-0 with 25 knockouts. I mean, that just the record alone, I think, is going to get him a lot of eyes. But I thought he's pretty good. I think he's somebody definitely to look out for at super featherweight and maybe potentially lightweight in the future. We'll see what it looks like. He has a good knockout win in the past over Victor Terrazas, so that's a solid one there. I know Antonio Orozco was on there too, making his comeback after the knockout loss to Jose Ramirez. He got the job done. He's one of those guys that he's gonna be tough to beat. I think Orozco at 140 and 147 is one of those guys that I guess he's a bit of the gatekeeper level at this point now, like where he's somebody that you have to beat in order to get to that next level, like championship level. Shizbiz asking what channel the fight on. The fights that I'm talking about was on DAZN yesterday. So if you have DAZN, you can go on there and catch the replay of them. Also, I mean, I'd be willing to bet you that you'll be able to probably find them here on YouTube at some point here in the near future, or maybe on Daily Motion. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how adamant they've been in terms of DAZN taking down some of these videos off of YouTube. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure how successful they've been at it recently. So couldn't necessarily tell you. I've been able to catch a lot of the main events live, fortunately for me, recently. So not sure about that one. Nico Macias was on there as well. His comeback after losing to Jesus Soto Coraza, and he wound up losing once again to Jeremy Ramos. I think he's kind of been exposed as somebody that's not ready for prime time. I think his record previous to the Soto Coraza fight got him some looks, but he's not at that level. Joey Gonzalez, good win over Rodrigo Guerrero. Rodrigo Guerrero, who's somebody that I actually thought of previously at back when he was at bantamweight, incidentally, as somebody that was really difficult. Up at featherweight, ultimately, I think he's too small. I think Joey Gonzalez kind of further proved that by knocking him out. But I mean, generally, it's still a relatively good win because I do think that Guerrero's a difficult opponent to look good against, and I do think that Joey Gonzalez looked relatively good against him, in spite of the fact that he was in there against somebody that threatened, I think, kind of to give him rounds. Not necessarily threatened to beat him, but threatened to give him some tough rounds. He got him out of there. Beyond that, unfortunately, I wasn't able to see Zorrilla live. I did see the knockout though. I did see him knocking out Gamaliel Diaz. I mean, it only went two rounds, so I'm guessing I didn't miss very much because that's pretty much when I was able to kind of tune in full time and like actually hold my attention on the card. Some of the other fights I was able to kind of just catch in glimpses. But got Diaz out of there. Diaz at this point, he used to be a contender. Like, back in the day, years ago, he was somebody that was actually difficult. Give some good fighters difficult fights. But nowadays, he's just somebody to beat up. Unfortunately for him, somebody to beat up. And Zorrilla managed to do that. He's an interesting prospect as well. I think he, like Acosta, like Machado, kind of was on previous to him. Is one of those guys that might be able to kind of be like some of the torch bearers for Puerto Rican fight fans and such. But oh yeah, I see you mentioned Zorrilla. Yeah, had a good performance. Yeah, he looks pretty impressive too. Relatively explosive, good power puncher. Let's see. Sean Newton saying Acosta versus Lopez fight. Yeah, I just kind of finished talking about that one. I thought Lopez gave Acosta some troublesome rounds, but some good experience rounds. And I think that Acosta will ultimately grow from that, and he'll definitely need to grow from that. I think if he's going to be somebody that comes out on top in terms of the talent pool at 108 pounds at this moment. Let me see what else. What else can I talk about? I mean, I guess I might as well mention Gvozdyk yesterday, since he did fight, but it didn't last very long. It was a bit of an anticlimax, I thought. I didn't think that Dudu and Gumbu really posed any real threat to him. I did feel like it was, a stay busy fight ostensibly. But Ngumbu, I mean, actually, I thought Ngumbu made him look a little bit bad. I was talking to Dan the Man earlier, and he was mentioning to me that he felt like Gvozdyk, maybe he might be mentally or psychologically affected by what's happened to Adonis Stevenson since their fight. And I hadn't necessarily even thought about that, but I mean, it's possible. It's entirely possible because he did look a little bit out of sorts in there against Ngumbu. I did think that part of it was due to Ngumbu being really awkward and kind of in survival mode. But Gvozdyk kind of crossing his feet a few times, missing kind of wide and just not quite looking like somebody that was looking to just completely blow Ngumbu out of the water, which I think you would kind of expect from a championship caliber fighter to do against somebody of Ngumbu's level. So ultimately, Ngumbu, I guess, wound up getting a Charlie horse and lost by TKO cramps. And yeah, that was it, man. Should have drank a little bit more Gatorade before jumping in the ring or something. But Gvozdyk got another W. It's kind of tough to gauge him though, man. If he is mentally affected by the Adonis Stevenson fight, I'm not sure that he could really come out on top in fights against his peers, against the likes of Kovalev, Bivol, Beterbiev. This is assuming Bivol stays at 175, because I do think that he's going to wind up moving down to 168. I do believe that to be the case. And Marcus Brown might give him a difficult fight too. Brown's a tricky one. Brown, I think, could probably get up on the cards against Volzdik, and will Volzdik have that killer instinct? Not to be harsh or insensitive to him, but will he have that killer instinct in order to come back in the fight the same way that it seemed like Badu Jack was trying to do against Brown, but ultimately failed to do because of the fact that his head was split open and he was bleeding all over the damn place, including in his eyes. Do I think Acosta could have the hardest punch in the low weights? Yeah, man. I mean, Acosta, at the very least, his record, I think, kind of shows it. It would kind of depend on what you mean by the low weights. Maybe below flyweight, I would say yes. I think I'd give that a pretty good solid yes. However, I do think that Alvarado is pretty much in the same realm. I don't think that there's very much separating their overall level of punching power. I think that if you were to kind of have them hit a punching machine or something, they'd probably hit equal level. I don't mean that punching machine that I guess Deontay Wilder and Gervonta Davis have been punching and stuff, because apparently like Davis hits harder than Wilder according to that thing. I think that thing just kind of measures like the speed of your punch, to be completely honest, not actually who's hitting harder, like who has more force behind the shot. Let's see, Sean Newton saying, yeah, it was a shame how the fight ended. Volzdik always starts slow. Yeah, I mean, yeah, to a degree. I thought that he started off pretty well and held everything up against Chilemba. So I thought that was a pretty good performance from him. But it is what it is. Yeah, Volzdik and Gumbo. That was the only fight that I saw from that card. I didn't really take the time out to watch the entire ESPN card. My eyes were more so focused on the DAZN card yesterday. Problem with Alvarado is that he get hits too much, says Xavier. But yeah, he does. But I mean, at the same time, he has a lot of power himself. And even though he does get hit a bit, he has held up, including against Yoka. And this was back when Yoka was like the body snatcher. He was knocking everybody out, especially to the body. So Alvarado and Acosta, man, that's what I want to see personally for my selfish reasons. To me, and the thing is, if they were to fight, even though I'd probably rate them slightly lower than, like, say, where Shiro is at or where Kyoguchi is at, just by virtue of Shiro and Kyoguchi's overall resume, record, and such. If they were to fight each other, the winner of that fight, I would actually place above both Shiro and Kyoguchi. Incidentally, I do think that that the winner of that fight would be able to leapfrog the other two champions. Not unlike I think the way that Butler managed to do so when he was able to defeat Ryoichi Taguchi. So, let me think what else. What else has happened recently in the sport of boxing? I've talked about it in other hangouts and stuff. The whole, I guess, Kubrat Pulev and Jenny Sushi situation. And even though I wouldn't necessarily advise a fighter to randomly kiss a reporter that's interviewing you. It's, first of all, it's unprofessional. Secondly, look at what's going on now. She's trying to get some kind of a sexual harassment case or a lawsuit going against them. But I think ultimately, in my personal opinion, just the way that it looks like a load of BS. It looks like something that she's trying to get paid. She's trying to get a payday in the aftermath, as opposed to actually being shocked at being sexually harassed or assaulted or whatever. But that's how it goes, man. You got to be careful. You got to be careful nowadays. Did I see Kerman Leheraga lost to David Avanesian? Funny enough, I saw the knockout. I saw the highlights of the knockout. I haven't seen the fight yet. Not entirely shocked, though. Leheraga isn't exactly hard to hit. Avanesian, at the very least, is one of these kind of rugged type fighters that is able to use like a high degree of strength in his fights. He was able to kind of like bully and beat up an old version of Shane Mosley. And it looked like, I'm guessing he was able to kind of do the same thing against Leheraga, who's somebody who's a little bit stiff when it comes to his defensive movement. Hard puncher, aggressive fighter, but a little bit stiff when it comes to what's being thrown back at him. So it's not entirely surprising to me to see Avanesian manage to clip him and get him out of there. Unfortunate for Spanish boxing, though. It seemed like he was one of the guys kind of leading the charge in terms of maybe a renaissance potentially over there. Let's see. Sean says, "I hope Shields kisses Radio Raheem." I don't know. Is Shields Shields a big fan of Radio Raheem or something? Matter of fact, if I remember right, I think Clarissa Shields actually commented on that whole situation. I think she said something about like, man, if somebody were to kiss me and I was a porter, I'd hit him right there. I don't think she was believing what Jenny was selling. I could be wrong though. I might be mixing her up with somebody else because I've seen so many different takes on that whole situation. I think they all kind of blur together in my mind. Now we will get Avanesian versus Josh Kelly. That's not a bad fight. That's not a bad fight. I think that's another good test for Josh Kelly. You know, prospect slash contender on the rise. We'll see what he's got, man. We'll see. Sooner than later, we're gonna really see what he's got. I think he's really talented. And, you know, I think actually pretty highly of him. I think I'd favor Kelly to beat Avanesian, but I mean that'll for sure be a test. You know, probably a sternest test on paper as far as what he's really got in the bag. You know, if he's able to go in there and just blow Avanesian out of the water, then we might have somebody special. I mean the near future boxing schedule, not necessarily a whole lot that's really kind of lighting things on fire for me though. Like nothing that I'm particularly excited about. You know, Lomachenko against Anthony Crawler, I think is a very easy fight for Lomachenko. You know, for as much criticism as I give the guy, Lomachenko's a top tier fighter, man, and ain't no Anthony $1 million Crawler gonna give that guy a tough fight. To me, if he manages to do so, I think Lomachenko might be on the slide. I think he might be, man. I don't think Krolla is somebody that should really be all that competitive with him. Maybe, you know, hit him a couple of times, you know, maybe might land like a wayward shot that gets Lomachenko's attention, you know, gives him a little bit of a wide-eyed look for a minute, but I mean, beyond that, I think Lomachenko's going to completely dispose of the guy. Xavier says, I want to see the World Boxing Super Series fights. Yeah, definitely. Me too, man. They can't come soon enough. They can't come soon enough. You know, Inoue versus Rodriguez, great fight. You got Josh Taylor versus Baranchik. Hopefully Baranchik doesn't pull out. Because I really want to see what Taylor's got. I really want to see what he's got in the back. And I think Baranchik is exactly the type of fighter to really push him and see exactly, you know, test him. That's a real litmus test right there because Baranchik doesn't stop throwing. He's a rugged fighter. Sean Newton mentioned Wisik Silwangek, aka Srisik Rungvisai versus Juan Francisco Estrada coming soon. Yeah, that's another fight I'm looking forward to. It's on a Friday, funny enough. Unfortunately, I might wind up having to fucking miss that one live just because it's on a Friday. I don't know. I'm gonna have to try and schedule things out so that I can peep that one live, man. But I'm looking forward to that one for sure. And on that same card too is TJ Doheny versus Daniel Roman, unification at 122. I'm looking forward to that one too. It's been a minute since we had any kind of unification at super bantamweight, so I'm looking forward to that one, big time, big time. They both had some really good recent performances, especially Roman. Roman's kind of surprised me. You know, somebody that doesn't have a lot of knockouts in his record, but somebody I think whose power is kind of deceiving because he's been wearing these guys out and stopping them. So if he was to do that against Doheny, I favor Roman personally, but if he was to stop Doheny, like that's something extra. That's something special in particular. Kama-san Loma is on the slide, especially at lightweight. Yeah, possibly, man. We'll see against Krolla. I think if he struggles with Krolla, I think there might be an argument for that. But I think if you know Lomachenko, I think is one of those guys. Ultimately, he's one of those guys that's going to get the maximal use of his talent. That's something that I could definitely give him credit for. You know, whenever I see videos or photos of him, he's training. He's doing different drills and stuff, hand-eye coordination drills, things of that nature, and he's trying to make the most of his talent, trying to make the most of his body, his physical attributes, and his athletic prime and his athletic life. You know, I've heard there's a saying that goes around that, you know, like athletes have two deaths. They have their athletic death and then they have their actual death. You know, their athletic death ultimately is when they're beyond their prime and their body can't perform at that top tier championship level anymore. And then there's their actual death where, of course, they meet their mortal demise. But you know, Lomachenko, I think, is one of those guys that you know, he's gonna try and stave off that athletic death for as much as he can, for as long as he can, you know, and hopefully he doesn't he doesn't forget to use the technical skills that I think that he does have in the bag, but he hasn't necessarily had to use in some of these recent fights because of the fact that he was physically more talented than a lot of these guys, or to such a degree that he didn't necessarily have to stay on his technical P's and Q's as much. Um, let's see. Sean saying Loman looks much better in this fight now that he has had more time after surgery. Possibly, possibly. We'll see. Xavier says there's actually another boxer that could take the place of Baranchik if he pulls out. He fought on the Prograis versus Flanagan undercard. Prograis versus Flanagan. Let me look that up. Matter of fact, Prograis versus Flanagan. Try and find out who you're talking about because I'll be able to recognize who it was. I'm guessing it was Subriel Matias who defeated Fernando Saucedo on there. Ooh, wow, not 13-0 with 13 knockouts. I mean, he hasn't fought anybody of major note. Brady's Prescott, I guess, would probably be his foremost opponent, I guess, in terms of fame and people knowing who he is and stuff. Oh, he beat Adrian Estrella. Yeah, yeah, okay. I remember this guy. Yeah. I mean, that's a big step up though, man. If this guy winds up being the fill-in for Branchik, that's a big step up for Matias, man. I mean, you never know. I mean, hey, he's 27, so he's not exactly a spring chicken, and I'm not sure about his amateur record, but I mean, hey, 13 wins with all of them by knockout. That's pretty dangerous. That's pretty dangerous stuff. We might have some kind of Ricardo Torres level stuff going on here. That might be tricky. Um, let's see. Yeah, Xavier saying yes, he is. John Nguyen saying also Victor Postol versus Mohamed Mimouni, comeback fight at 147. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Postol has left. See what he's got. See what he's got at the higher weight also, where his height and reach advantage may not pay as many dividends for him. Caleb Truex versus Peter Quillen coming up too, relatively soon. This is gonna be a couple 2 weeks now. Yeah, 2 weeks. 2 weeks from yesterday. Interesting. Peter Quillen should beat Caleb Truex. Ultimately, I think he's just more talented. Naturally, he's just more talented. He should beat him on talent alone. But Truex is difficult. He makes himself kind of difficult to fight. You know, I think he proved that against DeGale both times. But overall, Peter Quillen should be able to handle him. Quillen isn't somebody that's really accrued very much damage. He pretty much was the one and done against Daniel Jacobs. Jacobs just clipped him. He couldn't recover right in that fight, and now he's trying to make a comeback. We'll see how his body has been preserved in it with his time off and such. Claressa Shields, Christina Hammer is probably one of the more competitive fights coming up here. I think Hammer can give Shields a lot of trouble with the distance, the height and reach, long jab and everything. But I think Shields, physically speaking, might be a little bit too much for Hammer on the inside in particular. The only thing about Shields is that reach disadvantage is going to be tough. That's going to be tough to navigate because she's going to have to always be on the inside. She's going to have to really close the distance very fast and very frequently, very often, to be able to get in there against Hammer, because I don't think Shields' overall boxing acumen, her technical ability is all that high. I think it's good. I think it's solid. I think it's competent, but I don't think it's at the same level quite as much as Hammer's. And we'll see though. We'll see. I do favor Shields to win though. I do think that she'll be able to kind of wear Hammer down the stretch. Jaime Munguia against Dennis Hogan. Danny Garcia against Adrian Granados. I like that fight, Garcia versus Granados. I think Granados can give Garcia a lot of trouble. If there's anybody that might be able to knock out Granados, funny enough, it might be Garcia. But at the same time, if there's anybody that might be able to really do some serious damage to Garcia's overall reputation, it might be Granados. He's one of those kind of dark horse fighters at welterweight that any given day he might be able to upset one of these guys. That's heavily favored over him. Somebody that's a lot more notorious than he is, the way that Garcia is. I mean, beyond that, we're looking farther into the future. Prograis Relic in April 27th, Eastern Barthélemy. That's not a bad fight, Eastern Barthélemy. I like that one. What weight is that at though? I mean, I would hope that was at 140 because they're both skinny as hell to be making 135 still. But I mean, you never know about that one. Maybe it'll be like an over the weight fight or something. Yeah, and then farther into the future, Canelo Jacobs, Beterbiev. Oh, Kalajic. He's fighting against Kalajic. All right, that's a good fight. I like that fight. I like that fight. Kalajic, the man who, uh, I think to most people got robbed against Marcus Brown back when Marcus Brown was still on the come up. That's interesting. And then, like way off in the distance, AJ Miller, Wilder Brazil, etc. Yeah, I mean, close into the future. I'm not particularly impressed by the Crawford versus Khan fight. Do they? I wonder if there's even an undercard for that thing set up yet. Let me see. I want to see who's on the undercard. Because I mean, for all the crap that I give to a lot of pay-per-view cards, some of these undercards have some low-key really good fights on them. A lot of times they have some show stealers on them. All right, so we got Teofimo Lopez versus Edith Totley on the undercard of Crawford and Khan. I mean, I always like seeing Lopez. He's a fun fighter to watch. He's a show stealer, show stopper, scoring knockouts and such. Felix Verdejo versus Brian Vasquez. That's actually not a bad fight. Actually, that's a tough fight for Verdejo to come back against, though. That's a real tough fight for Verdejo to come back against, man. I think Vasquez might. I think Vasquez might smack Verdejo around. To be honest, man. Hey, honestly, if Verdejo beats Vasquez, he'll have that'll definitely be the signature win thus far in his career, and it'll definitely prove prove me wrong in terms of where I actually rate Verdejo, which is relatively low. I like not very high at all. Honestly, I think even a lot of French contenders beat the. I mean, he lost to a French contender, to be completely honest, in his last bout. So, matter of fact, I wonder what happened with that guy recently. That Inez Torres kid. What's he been doing recently? I had a draw last year. Split draw. Interesting. And then we have Shakur Stevenson versus Christopher Diaz. That'll be pretty interesting. See what Diaz has left after getting smacked around by Ito, and see exactly how deep the talent goes with Stevenson at this point in his career. You know, Diaz is somebody that was a bit of a prospect before he got exposed by Ito. So we'll see if he might be able to do the reverse to Stevenson and reverse his own fortunes. Unrivaled Boxing Talk asking, is there any word on Ubali's first defense at 118? The most likely is going to be Takuma Inoue, because Ubali has the WBC belt and Takuma Inoue has the interim WBC belt. Because of the fact that the WBC and all of their wisdom wound up sanctioning 2 separate bouts at 118 pounds for a vacant WBC title. So they got to unify those first. And then there's a very, very high likelihood that whomever was to win between Ubali against Takuma Inoue would likely wind up fighting against Luis Neri. So that'll be one to watch for sure. I think Ubali versus Inoue is a pretty close fight too. You know, Takuma is not the devastator that his brother is, but he's a very, very good fighter. Very rugged, very tough. Somebody that likes a scrap. I think Ubali is probably you know, I think I'd say Ubali is a slightly better technical boxer than Takuma Inoue, but I think Takuma is I think he's a little bit tougher on the inside than Ubali. I think he might be able to gut that one out. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. You know, Ubali I think was able to kind of outgut Rashid Warren in a relatively close fight, but I think I'm not sure if he completely has that against Inoue, against Takuma Inoue. But ultimately, I think Luis. Honestly, I think Luis Neri might be able to knock both of those guys out on the same night. That's that's just how good Neri is. He's dangerous, man. That guy's the wild card of the division. That guy's the guy that he doesn't look as impressive aesthetically as a Naoya Inoue, but I think he's every bit as dangerous as a Naoya Inoue, and including to Inoue himself. Including to him himself. But I mean, that all remains to be seen. The nice thing about Neri is the fact that he's with PBC now, so we're probably going to see him a lot more regularly. Ironically, because it seems like a lot of PBC fighters don't fight particularly often, but I think the ones at the lighter weight classes, that at the very least they'll have the exposure available to them, as opposed to whether they actually take it or not. I think ultimately Neri's going to take it, though. Xavier says 115 pounds also have good fights. Estrada versus Svisaket, Acosta versus Funai. Yeah, good ones. Palikta versus Yoka. Palikta versus Yoka, I'm looking forward to. Hopefully. I really hope that one happens. Heavy Ascension is a good good secondary also, but I really hope to see Palikta versus Yoka because I mean, just looking at Palikta versus Nietes and Yoka versus Nietes, Palikta versus Yoka is pretty even level fight. I would favor Yoka because of the level of experience that he has. But Palikta is difficult, man. Ioka has had trouble with guys that have a reach advantage over him, and Palikta absolutely has a height and reach advantage over him. Very, very good on the outside, very tricky, very quick on his feet. I think Palikta has just the fact that Palikta has a height, size, and weight and a speed advantage over Ioka is going to make it tough for Ioka because I'd say Ioka has a technical advantage over Palikta in terms of his skill set, but Palikta has, I think, all of the physical traits that can give Ioka a lot of issues. So did I, Sean. I had Ioka beating Nietes too. I thought he won that fight, but sometimes it doesn't always go your way. Nietes, interestingly enough, vacated his belt, of course, which is leading to the talks of Palikta versus Ioka potentially. And I guess Nietes is looking for legacy fights, big money fights, and so on and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Nietes, man. I'd imagine he vacated that belt specifically because he's gonna either try and chase the winner of Svisaket versus Estrada, or potentially try and chase another belt at 118, or the winner of the World Boxing Super Series title. Ultimately, I like just from Nietes' point of view, because of the fact that he's looking to try and maximize his profit, he's probably going to be going after all the Japanese fighters. He's probably going to be trying to, if not the winner of Svisaket against Estrada, probably going to try and go after Inoue. Naoya Inoue should come out on top on the WBSS, or Takuma Inoue should Takuma actually fight Ubali and defeat him. And especially if Nietes would say, for instance, hypothetically, Takuma Inoue fights Ubali, defeats him. Nietes fights Takuma Inoue, beats him. Now all of a sudden you have Nietes versus Naoya Inoue grudge match. Man, it writes itself. It sells itself. A lot of money there for Nietes to be able to retire on. I thought, hey, what is he? 37 now? Yeah, so he's getting up there, man. So at this point, he's looking to retire. He's looking to cash out and clean up, and maybe at some point become a promoter like his promoter was once a fighter as well. The great, well, I don't want to say great, he wasn't a champion, but the great contender, a la Villamor. Very, very tough fighter who unfortunately got the short end of the stick in terms of getting thrown into the wolves against Felito Lopez and what was that dude's name now? The Thai fighter that he lost to. Not Nantapech. It'll come to me. I just can't think of his name off the top of my head right now. Nietes versus Roman. Yeah, you know what? Matter of fact, Gonzalez. That's another one that I could see him potentially fighting. Chocolatito, though, I think ultimately would have to probably get another belt for that to be completely sellable for Nietes. I think Roman would have to maybe go in and beat Cal Yafai for Nietes to want to fight Roman specifically. I think that would probably have to happen, and I think that would happen if Yafai versus Gonzalez was made. I think Gonzalez beats Yafai. I think Yafai was very fortunate to get out of the Israel Gonzalez fight with the W. As Xavier agrees with us, thought that Ioka was beating Nietes as well. Thinks that Roman would be targeting Yafai. Yeah, I mean, I would. Yeah, Yafai has a lot of issues on the inside, and that's the bread and butter of Roman Gonzalez's style is inside fighting ability. So I could very well see that fight happen, come off. The only thing that's difficult though, in terms of Nietes potentially getting a fight against Gonzalez, should that happen, if Gonzalez was to go in there against Yafai, beat up Yafai, I think Eddie Hearn would. Well, I don't know. You know what? Matter of fact, he might try to make Gonzalez versus Nietes before he were to try to have Charlie Edwards move up to 115 and fight the winner of that fight. He might do that. Maybe try and get a little bit more wear and tear on both of those guys before he potentially, quote unquote, cashes out on Charlie Edwards. Wouldn't necessarily be a cash out outright, because Edwards might be able to keep his title at 112 and then drop that back down if he was to lose to either one of those guys. But in terms of actually taking the risk to begin with, it would make more sense to try and starve that out a little bit and and get Edwards a little bit more experience too before you risk something like that. But yeah, I mean that's how I would see those kind of potential scenarios going out. Unrivaled says Nietes versus Danair at 118 in Manila in 2020. I don't think Danair is gonna make it that far, to be honest with you. I think Danair is one of these guys that I think after his next loss, where there's a pretty good likelihood that he retires. I mean, I don't know. The money might be there for Danair versus Nietes. The only thing is, boxing in the Philippines is kind of a tricky one. It's a very niche sport over there, even though you think that it wouldn't be, especially with the high level of fame of Pacquiao. But as I understand it over there, a lot of the times, like even their world championship fighters aren't really televised live at all. Like they'll be put on tape delay or something. Sometimes the live events they'll have to actually like it'll be a pay-per-view in the Philippines. It's really strange the way they do it over there. I'm not entirely familiar with their level of television in terms of actually getting licensing for the fights, but that's to my knowledge and from what I've read, that seems to be the general the general issue over there, and part of the reason why a lot of Filipino fighters will travel outside of the country in order to get some of their bigger paydays. Going to Japan, going to Mexico, going to the U.S., etc. So, like Kankaz, Kankaz, a lot of his recent fights have been pretty much American bound, even if they're not in the U.S., but primarily televised for American audiences to watch. But I think I'm gonna wrap this one up here with that. Just wanted to give some quick recaps and general thoughts on some of the recent goings on and potential future goings on. Let me check boxing scene real quick, see if there's any breaking news that I need to give an opinion on. Oh damn, Lito Dante won the OBPF strawweight belt. Beat Cora. Tsubasa Cora. That's an upset, man. That's a big upset actually. Tsubasa Cora was a bit of a prospect, rising prospect in Japan. I'm gonna have to definitely check that fight out. Yeah, man. Cora was looking pretty solidly up until this loss. Damn. It looks like he last round got stopped in the 12th. I wonder who was up on the scorecards. I'm gonna have to check that one out. Let's see what else we got here. Bivol ready to face Marcus Brown. All right, Bivol might be staying at 175. I'd favor Bivol in that fight. I think he has the boxing acumen to keep up with Brown in the early rounds, and then ultimately outlast Brown in the later rounds, stamina wise. But I think that's gonna do it for this one. I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.